This is a special bonus episode for you. We have reached the point of the year where we have the good problem of we have more good content than we do have days between now and kickoff of the Ball State game. We are under 3 weeks to go till the start of the Ohio State football season, and we got a lot of stuff to share with you. On today's show, you're going to get to hear a bunch from new Ohio State defensive coordinator Matt Patricia. I guess he's not new this year, relatively new on the grand scale of things, but he had a lot of interesting stuff to say about a guy who actually is a new coach on this year's team. First question Matt Patricia got asked was about Arthur Smith, the new offensive coordinator. Now, both of those guys are former NFL head coaches, former NFL coordinators, so they have a lot of experience and a lot of wisdom that they can bring to the college game. What has it been like for Matt Patricia to have Arthur Smith around, and what kind of a benefit has that been to him?
Absolutely. So much fun to have him here, and it's great. Obviously, just practice, all the stuff that we're doing, trying to work against each other, different looks, different ideas, and I'm certainly looking at his eyes saying, hey, scout the defense for me here. Let me know what you see, some of maybe disguise looks, different packages, which is great because he's seen a bunch of that before and kind of is able to speak that. But we have a lot of fun talking about old stories too, which is great. You know, the history of the game is really important to both of us, and he's got a great history of the game, so it's fun to tell those stories back and forth. And I think what's really cool is, look, we're just so blessed and lucky to be here at Ohio State with Coach Day, who brought us both in from the NFL and kind of let us, get that joy of coaching and watching him maybe go through that a little bit of what I was experienced last year is kind of fun.
Matt Patricia took kind of a big leap of faith last year, jumping after more than 2 decades in the pros back into the college game. So when Arthur Smith was thinking about making that move, what did Matt Patricia share with him about his experience at the college level last year?
Yeah, I talked to him a lot actually before and during the process, just because he's such a great coach. I have so much respect for him. And I think we've gone through similar things, in our careers in the NFL, and maybe my perspective of, getting back to around a bunch of great young men and coaching and how wonderful that is, and maybe just telling them, reminding him of that a little bit was cool, I think, from that aspect of it. And then just, there's always kind of the normal questions like, hey, what's the difference between the NFL and college? What's the schedule? What's this look like? How's recruiting, all that stuff.
Every time we talk about the Ohio State defense for 2026, the conversation always kind of starts with all the guys who aren't here anymore. No more Caleb Downs, no more Arvell Reese, no more Sonny Styles. 8 starters in all gone from last year's defense. So do you have to change your expectations or your plans because of all those guys and the fact that they're not coming back?
No, I wish, it was good, but I'm sure they're kicking it off tonight and this weekend, so good for them. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So we had 51 new players, I think, overall on the team, and certainly with the young guys and the transfer guys, it's just a completely different group, And I think the great thing that's been interesting to watch through the course of the spring and the summer, really, is those different personalities coming from different areas, right? So whether it's, 2 from one school in the SEC, another from the ACC, another from the Big Ten, and just kind of watching those cultures kind of come in the building and then get on the Buckeye culture here has been pretty cool. And then watch our young guys that are, that have been here really kind of emerge to lead and kind of show them the way has been really neat. Now, schematically, obviously, we're trying to figure out what everybody can do because we haven't had that development with a lot of these guys, and they've all done different things in different places. So spring was good to see it. Camp is really important right now, really, as we're working on some fundamentals and stuff to see how those schemes work with some of the fundamental techniques that these guys can actually do.
Every dark cloud has its silver lining. So when you lose all those guys last year, does that maybe open up some different things this year that maybe you can do this year that you couldn't last year?
That's a good one. I think last year, what was cool was certainly the guys were here, we had some obviously great players. I think the biggest thing for me was figuring out what could they do, what do they do well, and how do we fit that into things scheme-wise that they can do well and play fast. I feel we're probably still in the same boat. It's just there's probably no history behind a couple of years of watching them kind of grow and develop. So we have to evaluate that soon and figure out what do they do now. And yes, I think there are different skill sets on the field now than maybe what we had last year. Not better or worse, just different. So it is really trying to figure out what do they do well now.
Every fall, there are always these storylines that turn into just constant things that we're just always talking about. One of them this year is the 4-3 versus the 4-2-5. And, do they want to play nickel as much as they used to? Are they going to play more 3 linebacker looks this year? They certainly have a lot of flexibility there. So How do you weigh those two different schemes and those two different looks against each other?
Yeah, I do. I do think we have a lot of flexibility, which is nice in both groups, which is great. Hopefully, we can use both in those situations. It's interesting, the game of football kind of cycles through, and what was old is new, and kind of vice versa. So I see a lot more of those bigger groupings coming back. So obviously, the bigger the offense gets, then we have to be able to hold up to that. And so maybe the third linebacker on the field is important in that situation. And then being able to have the multiple flexibilities of DBs is good, because I think that puts a lot of stress on the offense. So I do think we have to try to figure out a way to do that as much as possible.
Back in the spring, we thought we had a very good idea of what the secondary was going to look like. So a ton of 3 safety lineups. And then this fall, really haven't seen any of those, or very few of them anyway. Really mostly seen, again, 4-3 with 3 linebackers on the field, or a lineup with the nickel, but with 3 corners out there with Jay Timmons in the slot. That's really been the lineup for the most part this fall. So is that 3 safety look going away?
I think one of the things that happens for us defensively is you always have to also look at see what offensive personnel is on the field. So in some of those different groups, it could be personnel based on what we're seeing that just has that different mix of players on the field. And I think being in between, if you do have to have 3 safeties on the field against like a bigger personnel group, can you hold up or can you not? If you don't, then you go to bigger, obviously, personnel up front. And some of that, I think, in the back end is honestly figuring out, because there are new players on the field, what exactly are they? Are they safeties, nickels, corners? I think we're still evaluating that through the spring and trying to figure out, what are the best positions for those guys. Maybe it's just DBs. I don't know. We'll let Texas figure that out.
Mentioned that they lost 8 starters off of last year's defense. One of the guys they did not lose is Kenyatta Jackson. So how big was it to get him back? He seems like he's going to be a very big piece of the puzzle at defensive end this year.
It's been great. I love to be around Kenyatta and certainly watching him grow, just even from last year, getting on the field, having an opportunity to go play, watching him kind of really develop his skill set through the season. But now giving him a whole nother toolbox that I think we've built on top of what he did last year, which is really cool to watch him do that. So, look, he's obviously a great player for us. He's out on the field. He's a leader for us. And, we're going to lean on him as much as we can for sure.
Last year's defense, they had the luxury of guys like Sonny Styles and Arvell Reese and Caleb Downs, where not only were they incredible athletes, they were also guys that could just kind of do it all. Whatever you wanted them to do, yeah, sure, they can do that. So do they have guys who can do that this year to give them that kind of flexibility?
Last year we were really blessed to be able to do that with those guys. I think everybody knows that. I think this year, I don't know. I think we're trying to figure that out. Interesting for us this week, right? So we're in full pads finally, and long practices. So this week is a heavy fundamentals week. Just getting that work in, get through the end of the week, evaluate what that looks like, and then I think as we work towards next week, we'll start to kind of maybe mix some packages and see what that actually looks like. And the biggest thing for me, when you lose the players that walked out the door last year, has to be the communication. And even though the talent might be there to do it, if we can't communicate it on the field, it really doesn't matter at that point, because what we can't have is like an ME or a busted play. So maybe put the stress on them next week with some of that really heavy communication to see if we can do that.
Communication is one of those things that college football coaches get absolutely obsessed over this time of year on both sides of the ball. And on defense, when you're looking at communication, does that start with guys who are veterans like Jalen McClain?
We'll always kind of put the stress of the communication in the middle of the defense, because obviously then it can echo out, to their side. So the linebackers sitting in the middle. It's going to start with, certainly Peyton and Christian. TJ and Riley are coming along really well there too, which is great. And some of the young guys too are stepping up. And then the safety group has to communicate. Certainly Jalen, being here under me last year, the verbiage is the same for him. And so now it's just kind of relating some of the verbiage we had last year to, hey, what do you think about this? What do you, and it was great. Last year, even with Caleb and Jalen back there, we could have these conceptual conversations. And so now it's a lot of me and Jalen having that, as we're trying to catch up those other young players and new players to the terminology.
Ohio State lost all sorts of veterans off of last year's defense, but they also brought in some veterans from other schools, like Earl Little from Florida State, Christian Allegro from Wisconsin, James Smith from Alabama. Those guys they're new here, but they're not new to defense, or definitely not new to college football. So how much is having imported veterans maybe benefit them this year?
I actually was going to look at this. I think, do we have more snaps on the field potentially this year of guys returning than we did last year? We might, right? We might from that. Yeah, at this time. So I think that'll be interesting. For me, what I feel about that experience really is, okay, when we get in the game, it's going to be hopefully a lot of panic. Like you're just going to experience. I think young players or guys that haven't played a lot, the game can get pretty, it can be a lot of stress, a lot of panic in those deals. And I think what you're looking for is for a defense to be, not panic, patient, and be able to read through. So I will lean on that experience to make sure the patience is there. Schematically, though, I think it'll be whatever we feel is best on the field.
Of the guys who are back from the previous year, how many guys do they feel like they can really depend on from those returning players?
I mean, I'm going to lean, obviously, on the guys that were on the field the most last year, certainly with Jalen and KJ and Jermaine. I like where Peyton's at, in the middle of defense. He played a little bit for us last year, which was great for sure. Guys up front, we're going to have to lean on Edric and certainly Will Smith and some of those guys to be able to kind of hold up in there. So it's been good. We've actually been rotating a bunch of guys, so it's been fun.
One of the guys they have to replace from last year's team is nose tackle Kayden McDonald. He was just an absolute force in the middle of that defensive line. That is not something they have every year. So if you're trying to replace Kayden McDonald, is that something you just almost by necessity have to just do by committee this year?
Yeah, I think it'll be committee early on. I do. I really think, especially as we kind of work through the season and gain experience by those guys, and certainly from, early in the year, you kind of try to build those reps up as you get ready for the long haul. So committee would be great. It's really hard to replace really good players in the middle of the defense. I do believe that, though. I believe it's important to be strong in the middle of the defense, and certainly coming from my background at New England and having guys like, whether it was Keith Traylor or Vince Wilfork or, any of those guys, Ted Washington back in the day. I mean, those are some big boys rolling through there. So, I don't know. I think if you coach linebackers and kind of sit in that second level, the bigger those dudes are up front, the more comfortable you feel. So you like that for sure.
How much time do you spend thinking about what you have to replace and what you lost after last year's team versus figuring out, okay, you just set everything from last year aside and you just start from scratch and figure out what you're good at this season?
I would say this. I think last year was great. Those guys were unbelievable. I was, super lucky to, so much fun to be around those guys. And really the process up to the draft, post-draft, training camp, being in contact with them, talking to them through camp, and, excited for them for this weekend is awesome. And I love that. I love that relationship, and I love hearing from them, and I love having that connection with them for sure. But as far as this year, you have to move on. Every year's a new year and you start over, and that's what we had to do. So it's really, we've moved on from last year from that as far as the Buckeyes on field, what we had, and now it's really trying to figure out what we have this year.
We spent a bunch of this fall talking about 3 linebacker sets. That is the 3 in the 4-3, if you hear us talking about a 4-3 defense. And it looks like they will probably be playing more 3 linebacker sets this year. So what has Matt Patricia seen from the linebackers so far this camp that has him feeling good about their ability to do that?
I think last year, obviously, I'll take 265, 245-pound guys over like anytime. Those are great. But we had like 2, like 2 guys out there that we were kind of rolling. I feel, to your point, I feel like we have a good depth group that is all learning and kind of really growing at the same time. So that, I think, is what's really neat, is that Peyton's in, TJ's in, Riley's in, Eli Leah's in, Christian's in, and I feel like, hey, we're good. Communication is good. Front is good. We can play the run game. I feel like when you have those waves of players, I do think it kind of like gives you a little bit of advantage, as you go through the game. So I like where they're at. I like their progress. I like them taking ownership of the defense. That's the biggest thing, you always got to someone's got to be, in front of the huddle, and certainly linebackers do it the most. So I like that group right now. It's fun.
Last year's team had so many individual stars. This year's team is certainly going to have its standouts. But is this maybe a team where you're going to just see more different guys on the field?
Yeah, that's probably a good way to look at it. I think we have a lot of really good depth players this year. I really do. I want to make sure they're in the right spots. I want to do the best I can to make sure that I'm putting them in the right position to go make plays for sure.
All right, so there you go. Matt Patricia, defensive coordinator for the Buckeyes, some of his thoughts on the upcoming season. Hope you guys enjoyed that one. We will have more bonus shows coming up for you throughout the day, throughout the week, on your podcast platform of choice and at youtube.com/@BuckeyeInsiders. And as I said, there is a lot to talk about right now, which is why you're getting all these extra shows. And if you want to talk about it with us even more, the best place to do that is at BuckeyeInsiders.com. That's where Tony and I are your team insiders. Chuck Maletti, he is your recruiting insider. Ross Fulton, Michael Pettit, they are your scheme insiders. Marcus Hartman, he is your basketball insider. We are all at BuckeyeInsiders.com, and we would love to see you there as well. A really, really fun and active community on the Insiders board. We've been sharing a lot of information there with our readers and with our members. We can't necessarily share outside of the paywall. So if you want to find us, you want to dive a lot deeper on this year's Ohio State football team, that is the place to do it, BuckeyeInsiders.com. That'll do it for now. Thank you guys all for joining us. We'll be back with another bonus episode soon.